It is the dead of the NFL offseason, which means us football fans have time to explore new avenues and investigate questions we normally wouldn't ask during the NFL regular season. Which brings me to the topic of today's video. Welcome to a special episode of Football Ancestry, where I dug deep into the numbers to find out which team has the most negative receiving yards in NFL history. So obviously this is going to be a little bit more informal than my normal episodes, so let me give you a little bit of a format here. First, I'm going to answer the question that I asked at the top of this video, which is which team has the least amount of receiving yards. Then I'm going to go into some more stats and numbers that I also found interesting through this research. And then finally at the end, I'll provide you guys a graphic of each team's negative receiving yards so you can find your team and I guess use it for bragging rights or something, whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do with that information. Okay, so as I asked at the top of this video, which team has the most negative receiving yards in the NFL? So which team has thrown the ball, their receivers have caught the ball, and finished behind the line of scrimmage? I found these numbers by going to profootballreference.com, looking at each team's entire history, sorting by player receiving yards, and then just combining all the negative yards together to get the team total. So which team has the most negative yards? That would be the Cleveland Browns, with negative 72 yards receiving in their team history. Now, negative 72 yards probably doesn't sound like a lot for an entire team's combined history, but when I show you some of these other numbers to provide context, you're going to see just how embarrassing that is for the Cleveland Browns, okay? So there you go, the Browns are a big loser for today, but let's ask the flip side of that question. Which team has the least negative yards receiving in their history? Well, that honor goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who in their entire history have just negative 7 yards receiving. I'll remind you, the Browns were negative 72, so they have 10 times less than the Browns, making them the winner of today's video because they have the least amount of negative receiving yards. So there you go, Buccaneers. You can wear that crown this offseason if you want. You're welcome. But now let's look at a bigger picture. We know which team has the most and we know which team has the least, but let's break it down by divisions. So every team can take pride in their own division. Like we have the toughest division, we have the strongest division. So here's another way you can argue about divisions. Which one has the least amount of negative receiving yards and which one has thrown the most amount of negative receiving yards? So you would think that maybe the AFC North might be in contention here for the most negative receiving yards since, you know, the Browns had negative 72 just by themselves. But actually there's another division that takes the crown. And that division with the most negative receiving yards is the NFC East. This wonderful division stayed pretty close to each other in numbers and all pretty consistently high to find a total of negative 195 yards combined across their division, with the Cowboys and Commanders tied with negative 41 yards receiving in their team history, and the Giants coming in next with negative 55, and then the Eagles with negative 58 yards receiving in their history. So this means the NFC East is the division that we can all clown on. They have the most negative receiving yards, so haha, joke's on them. But which division has the least negative receiving yards? Now this one does make sense. The Buccaneers had just negative 7 yards, so naturally the NFC South has the least negative yards total. Their division has the Bucs at negative 7 yards, and then the Panthers at negative 11, the Saints at negative 18, and the Falcons at negative 38, for a division total of negative 74 receiving yards, which is over 100 less than the NFC East. So, way to go NFC South. You're at least the leader in something. Congratulations. You're the best in throwing the least amount of negative yards. So, woohoo. Now, before I move on, let's look at the biggest picture. Which conference has thrown for the most negative receiving yards? That honor goes to the AFC, who threw for a combined negative 576 yards. Meanwhile, the NFC has a combined negative 501 receiving yards. Alright, so I'm going to take a more granular look at this. I want to take a different angle. So we've looked at teams, we've looked at divisions, we looked at the conference as a whole, but now I want to look at the individuals responsible for this, such as which position is responsible for the most negative receiving yards. So how I figured this out was I looked at every single team, I found the player responsible for the most negative receiving yards on their team, and then I just notched down their position, and then I found out which position was listed the most amount of times. And those position options are quarterback, offensive line, defense, running backs, and fullbacks. So out of those positions and groups of positions, which one do you think would have the most negative receiving yards? Because the answer is overwhelmingly quarterbacks. Quarterbacks were listed 19 times out of the 32 teams in the NFL. The next most popular position was actually offensive line that had 8. And then another big drop off to running backs who had 3, defense who had just 2 players, and then fullback. So that's how the position groups break up for most negative receiving yards on each team. I was kind of shocked it was quarterback, but I guess maybe it makes sense with like trick plays or something like that. I'm not sure how exactly it breaks down, but they were the position most often responsible for the most negative receiving yards. But now we want to look even more microscopic. Which individual player is responsible for the most negative receiving yards by themselves? So out of the entire history of the NFL, every single player who's entered the league, which one has finished their career with the most negative receiving yards, according to Pro Football Reference? That player is George Blanda of the Tennessee Titans, who finished with negative 23 yards receiving in his career just by himself, which is kind of absurd to think about because you think a 20-yard pass forwards is a pretty long pass, and then somehow you ended up with that but going the other direction. Congratulations, George Blanda. It's certainly something I wasn't expecting, and you achieved it, so congratulations. You're a big winner or a loser, depending on how you want to look at it. Now, before we leave, I'm going to show each team's total negative receiving yards and their history, and also to the side of that, which player on those teams were responsible for the most negative receiving yards in their history. So if you want to look at those, find your team, and then let me know in the comments whether you're proud of your team or disappointed with your team, shocked by the number maybe. I certainly found some of these numbers shocking one way or the other, and I don't know, it was a bit random. Maybe you took something from this video, maybe you didn't. I guess it really doesn't matter. It was kind of just useless off-season knowledge to throw at you, but I hope you did find it entertaining in the very least. And yeah, just let me know in the comments if you found anything shocking from this video that you weren't expecting, and then maybe my mission was accomplished, because I know nobody asked for this video to be made, but I made it, and you watched it all the way till the end. So thank you. I really do appreciate that. That's how I know you're a real football fan, because you watched the very end of a video about negative yards receiving. Way to stick with it. If you could subscribe to stay notified of future uploads, I promise it'll be more regular content in the future and not something as random as this. But if you did like it, go ahead and give the video a like so I know that you did enjoy this type of content. Again, I really appreciate you guys for just sticking around, not only for this goofy video, but also just for all of my uploads and always supporting the channel with your kind words and interaction. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, just want to say thank you, and I will see you in the next one.